Hi there, welcome to What Series 12, and this is number 24. We're really cooking along now. And I'm going to be reading to you from Acts chapter 18. I'll read the whole passage and then I'll just bring up some points. Let's see how we go here. Let's read from verse 1. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. And he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all Jews to leave Rome, and he went to see them. And because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and worked, for they were tent makers by trade. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade Jews and Greeks. When Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul was occupied with the word, testifying to the Jews that the Christ was Jesus. And when they opposed and reviled him, he shook out his garment and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am innocent. From now on I will go to the Gentiles." And he left there and he went to the house of a man named Titus Justus, a worshipper of God. His house was next door to the synagogue. Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed in the Lord, together with his entire household, and many of the Corinthians, hearing Paul, believed and were baptized. And the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, "Do not be afraid, but go on speaking, and do not be silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in this city who are my people." And he stayed 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. But when Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him before the tribunal, saying, "This man is persuading people to worship God contrary to the law." But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, "If it were a matter of wrongdoing or vicious crime, O Jews, I would have reason to accept your complaint. But since it is a matter of question about words and names and your own law, see to it yourselves. I refuse to be a judge of such things." And he drove them from the tribunal. And they were all seized by Sosthenes, the ruler of the synagogue, and beat him in front of the tribunal. But Gallio paid attention to any of this. After this, Paul stayed many days longer and then took his leave of the brothers and set sail for Syria, and with him Priscilla and Aquila. At Cenchreae, he had cut his hair, for he was under a vow. Really interesting passage. There's a lot of stuff in there that is very, very cultural. Now, where do we place a lot of that stuff? It's difficult, isn't it? Mainly because, well, it's different. But there is a template for us on how to do things. Notice it says in verse 3, he was of the same trade. Now, Paul, he was a tent maker, and he had something in common with the people that he began to mentor. Notice it says, and because he was of the same trade, he stayed with them and worked, for they were tent makers by trade. Yeah, common ground to start with. Secondly, he explained it. Notice in verse 5 it says that Paul reasoned and attempted to persuade them. Actually, verse 4 says, and he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade Jews and Greeks. Here's another one. Sometimes, this is number 3, oppositions mean you've just got to get out. Verse 6 says, and when they opposed and reviled him, he shook out his garment and said to them, "I'm out of here." And what was this shaking of the garments? It's a symbolic way of saying, I can no longer take responsibility for you. There comes a time when, it means you've just got to walk away from some things. And you've just got to admit, time's up. I understand that. The fourth thing I want to point out is, just as sometimes you have to give up, sometimes you've got to hang in there. And this is the message from the Lord for Paul. Verse 9, and the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, do not be afraid, but go on speaking and do not be silent. Yeah. Just as you've got to leave sometimes, other times you've got to hang in there and talk about it. The fifth thing I want to briefly bring up is sometimes you need to hang around to finish the job. Notice it says in verse 18, after this Paul stayed many days longer and then took leave of the brothers and set sail for Syria with Priscilla and Aquila. He'd already been there 1 year and 6 months. Sometimes ministry takes time. When you find people you are to work with, we need to firstly spend time with them and then do it with them. And then perhaps we take them on the journey further. There's some good lessons for us there, and go back over and read that, because I think there's a whole heap of stuff in there which may be very specific to who we are. Bless you.